Hello. Thanks to Vincent and everyone at Ayrshire Heartnet for inviting me to contribute to the festival. It's a great honour to be reading for you, and thanks to the rest of you for listening and watching. So I'm going to read a few poems for about 20 minutes, and I thought I would start with some foodie poems that I have. I was talking to a friend of mine, Don, recently, and he mentioned that Hartnett was a fairly ardent cook himself. Um, so I thought it would be apt to kind of start with some of those. And I'm going to start with the shortest of those, which is it's called Approach to an Egg. And I have a few poems which are approaches to this and that. So I suppose they're something of a series. And this is the shortest of them, called Approach to an Egg. A boiled egg is a fresh beginning, and you tap the pale, frangible shell so delicately with the edge of your spoon you could be a convict, careful not to wake your cellmate while you test the walls for weak spots, brow glazed in response to a sun rising the other side. So the next poem is one of those also, and very much in the same vein, and it's called Approach to Chile. And this is from my friend Phil, this particular poem. I'm catching the back garden in a colander held up to the kitchen window, catching rather the fierce green glare that filters in. When I've had enough, I turn, think. If I took a hacksaw and cut up the kitchen table piece by piece, at what point exactly would it cease to be a table? Which leg, if any, contains essence of table? This kills time. Soon you will be home from a late shift, and I'll have cooked us both a vicious chili, spitting with onion, tomato, the red and yellow peppers, lentils, beans, dashed with paprika, cumin. Too much habanero. Now they're mingling, ready to have their tantrum on our tongues. What's left but to uncork a Côte du Rhône and rearrange the sitting room in my head? There is no TV, so all the furniture points to the furniture. I slug back a glass, then one by one tip up the chairs. So this next poem is more oblique than the other food poems, I suppose, and I remember it coming very quickly when I wrote it after work one day. I had the first line in my head for months without having written it down. I hadn't expected to write that day, and when I wrote the first line, the second line generated itself, and the third line, and the fourth, and so on, and then the thing just seemed to be written, which is not always how they come, but this one happened fast. It's called Quiche. Pain is a basement cafe, and all of us are scrubbing our merciless scrub, said the lady in the bloody apron, staring through me. I'd asked for a slice of quiche with goat's cheese, and my finger was frozen on the sneeze glass. Either I can be your mentor, or you can wear pajamas, the mechanic yelled over the racket in his garage, when I suggested egg white was no substitute for glue. He climbed under the hood, and hasn't come out since. A fly on the wall is enough company for a lifetime, my mother insisted, while I stood above her on a stool, tending that fuse box. She wore black all the time now. She kept spilling Lucozade on the dachshund in her lap. I was out in the shed, reaching back to oil the hinges that held my wings in position. It was hot work. The last hour will be our worst, my wife said, and when I soared, our children were quick red ants, leading her from the scene. So, the last of those poems that I'm going to read is a poem which is also a tribute to Joni Mitchell, in particular her album Blue, which has meant a lot to me for many years. And for some reason, it tends to be an album that I play while cooking. And this poem is called Listening to Joni Mitchell's Blue While Cooking Poposo. More paint than accompaniment, your chords. The day I held the yellowed Tuscan recipe I chanced on, bent over charity shop shelves in Bantry Square. Your voice arose from blue. I mean my Bluetooth pocket speaker, Spotified, cued and looped and ringing fine as glass. You say, the bed's too big, the frying pan's too wide, but here's a shell for the blue. Who's Richard? All ears, I seared cubed beef with garlic cloves, a teacup of Chianti, black pepper in reckless dashes. I chopped tomatoes gorgeous as her mouth that sealed evening. And though she didn't stay, still your voice moves through my kitchen at night. It's California. Will you take me as I am? So, moving on to some other poems. The next one I'm going to read was inspired, if you like, by an incident in a pub at a time when I was out of work myself and happened to overhear two lads boasting about how much they made themselves in a year, sort of in competition with each other. It became clear. So the poem, I suppose, takes off from that kind of braggadocio, that overheard braggadocio, and I imagine, or the speaker imagines himself as part of it. And it's called The Triangle. I should never have written the instruction manual illustrating the 52 distinct tones that can be struck from the triangle, popular now in concert halls from here to Berlin. It's brought me nothing but success. The joke at first was exquisite as a deviled egg, and the expression on their faces like a sweet pimento. You put the phony in symphony tonight, grinned back the shiny hand dryer and the gents. Gobs dropped, and I went on, describing the point tapped just so for the blackbird's dawn trill, the ripple on a clear lake in Sweden, the squeak of gas that jets from a burning coal. One tone only audible to toddlers, another only to dogs. Of course I reddened when those rich fools Googled me. The search results proved it true. The hits were legion. Not only that, the book had entered its 4th print run and was forthcoming in Russian translation. That's when it occurred to me that I was late to deliver the keynote address at the annual summit for lovers of the triangle, my lecture on the sweeter octaves of beryllium copper, how to damp it for the rustle, like the train of a bridal dress trailed over cobbles, or pitch it like the mice celebrating the owl's demise by lightning, or the ting so crystalline it's called frost creeping. So I jotted some notes, grabbed my jacket, and said, taxi. So, the next poem grew out of an abandoned translation that I made of a poem by Arthur Rimbaud called Le Buffet, and it incorporates lines from that. I suppose you would say it's more a version than a translation that I'd made. And is there anything else I suppose I should say about this? I think it's fairly self-explanatory aside from that. And the title is Memory is a Wardrobe, and that comes from a book called The Poetics of Space by Gaston Bachelard. I had the blue suitcase open on the floor, packed cardboard boxes. I thought of Rambo's Le Buffet, that scuffed oak wardrobe, how it opened up to him like an old woman lost for words, tongue torn between come in, clear off. I'm standing at the wardrobe now, as though turning the next page in a good crime novel and want to sleuth for clues, follow up that suggestion of perfume or fruit that all too often escapes me in seconds, back to something like contentment for once. I mean again. There must be a shoebox of marbles, dueling cards still buried at the back, beyond the stiff shirts whispering to each other of the stranger, set a dangle on wire hangers, and beneath them 2 drawers that bruise inwards with the shadow of rich red wine. I knew this woman who'd shut her larkspur blue eyelids, tilt head back, the better to see detail bleeding from a story. I close my eyes, and some version of the poem returns. It's some rush, this interior wilderness. But I forget the rest. The poem disappears in its edition between others that walk straight into the sunlight over the hills, and it clicks that home is where the hurt is, or has been, or will be. No buffing the blunt scuffs from its scarred face, the wardrobe. But I know it knows a thing or two, though it's not letting on, when I open back the sly doors and it whistles. I should say as well, that poem is more commonly translated as the sideboard, from what I've seen. And I suppose whenever I read the poem, I visualized a wardrobe, because a sideboard wasn't a term, I suppose, that I'd have been familiar with from living speech, so I just visualized that, and it seemed more, it brought it closer to me. The next poem that I'm going to read is called Rachel's Coat Inside Out, and it's an elegy of sorts for a school friend who died by suicide. And I suppose in attempting to imagine what was going on in those months leading up to that, the metaphor came to me at the end of this poem of the rat, something I had seen around the same time as I'd heard about that event with this person I hadn't seen in a while. And I'll read the poem. It's called Rachel's Coat Inside Out. It's floating on a wire hanger now, from the lowest branch in a corner of the forest. You unhook it, thumbs worrying stitches for what you missed last time in the dark, shifty material lining the interior. The slit left by a torn away button burns, the nervous designs of moths flickering in and out at the collar. Your dreams make all kinds of no sense. Locked cabinets with cobwebs across the wobbly glass knobs. Rachel adjusts on her nothing shoulders the winter coat she'd have worn, the stitching so gone in the pockets her hands can believe they're bottomless. She could keep a rat in one, the teeth, the pink loop of tail, brush against us this close, and who would even know what she carried there? Okay, so the next poem I'm going to read, I suppose, is connected in a way to the last two in its preoccupation with an object. It's called Pine Box in the Flea Market, and I've always had a special love for flea markets and the way in which, I suppose, lots of Seemingly unrelated objects are suddenly brought into relationship with each other, and they sort of become something together, which is none of them separately. And there's a spark about it that I find very stimulating. And I'm just going to read the poem Pine Box in the Flea Market. The japanned pine box, with its cold brass handle and clasp, makes an enigma of the room. Opening it will be intimate, you think, like the sudden glimpse of a heel when she nips to the bath, leaving you and the bedposts to interpret this new hush. The box is burnished orange-brown, a finish the tint of Chilean myrtle, or something choked with paprika, with corners that could cut like fishhooks. Watch your thumbs. You want to poke about inside, to shuck it open with an oyster knife, spy in over the pine horizon, and wished you're saying, wished. Inside, maybe a bunch of shrunken heads, a rosary of goat's teeth, bone blushing, a pair of rusty rubber-handled pliers, the peekaboo of a tarantula. You are a horsefly learning immensity at the brink of a donkey's ear. You can just picture shouldering it home, past bleeding candles, black veils, mourners falling into step, and the shops closing on McCurtain Street. Someone clips a leash on his dog. This is the clock's insomnia now, your shoulder killing you all the way home to a room on a numberless avenue where blue snow is falling. Okay, so I think I'm going to finish on this next poem, which is a poem for or in memory of Matthew Sweeney, who was a friend and teacher of mine. And the poem is called Pinball. He let the oxygen mask slip from the crow's nest of stubble, so I leant in closer to catch that he didn't want a headstone. No wings, no spidery Gothic script. Instead, an old pinball machine should mark the place of his grave. He liked the plink under his thumbs. He talked bumpers, flippers, kickers, forbidden tilts, shooting for the moon. How a ball knocked out of bounds might come back, Lazarus, and win. I saw tournaments among the tombs, a horse box paused by the fresh earth, a generator set up to the side under that knuckle of hill in Donegal. He inserts the first cold coins by the yew trees, under the moon, pulls the plunger. Flashing outlanes bop and spark against the marble, focusing names and dates, gilt epitaphs and stone angels, watching high scores rack up. I know before the night is out, his initials will join the wizards. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.